Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. This is another in my series of DC versus Marvel battles. Which character will reign supreme in the comic world? So I'm going to be looking at, this is actually round 2. I did an earlier video, and I'll link that below at the end of the video that you can check out, which is round 1 of looking at these two characters. And the characters that I'm going to be looking at are Green Lantern and Iron Man. So the first video I looked at their first appearances, and I figured that they're pretty iconic characters, and they're both of that high stature within their respective comics. So I thought, what better way to do a round 2 and see who can win in the second round would be to look at not just their first appearances, but their first comics. And so for that, I have 2 books, Green Lantern #1 and Iron Man #1. So this is round 2 of the battle, and we'll get into the 2 books, and I'll tell you a little bit about each of the books. To give you a little history, this book is from 1960, and it actually has a first appearance as well. First appearance of the Guardians of the Universe. So the interesting thing with Green Lantern is that when they created Hal Jordan and the whole Silver Age version of the Green Lantern, they really took him to a cosmic level. And they really changed the origin of the Green Lantern. So before, the Green Lantern was all about magic, the magic of the lantern, but afterwards it became this force that's used in the galaxy, that is used to basically, and through the power of will, you get the powers of the Green Lantern. So very different story. And Green Lantern, this is his first book. And it didn't happen very much after his first Showcase appearance. And if you know anything about Showcase is kind of an interesting thing for DC. What it'll do is it'll showcase different books that they're planning on launching. And so they'll first of all put it in Showcase, and then later they'll actually bring out the series. They did the same with Aquaman and a bunch of other major series that first appeared in Showcase, then appeared in as regular comic series. So this is the first Green Lantern from 1960. And this book, so I'm going to be comparing 3.0s to each other. Green Lantern in a 3.0 goes for about $800 is the fair market value for a 3.0. I think that's a little bit low. I think the fair market value is a little bit low based on Go Collect, but I think that's roughly correct. I paid about $600 for this, so I maybe paid a little bit too much. So Green Lantern #1 sells for about, in a 3.0, sells for $800. There are 103 3.0s on the census, and 1,222 of these on the census altogether. So fairly rare book. Only 1,200 on the census. That's pretty rare. Now we got to compare that to Iron Man. Iron Man #1. So Iron Man #1 is much more common on the census. There are 6,764 of these on the census. So roughly 6 times as many of these, almost 5.5, 6 times as many of these on the census. So just a really much more common book. In the 3.0, there are 209 of these on the census. So about double as many of these on the census. Now the price actually kind of reflects their equivalence. Iron Man #1 is roughly $475 for the first Iron Man comic. It's not an expensive comic comparatively to Green Lantern #1. And this book came out in 1968. So it came out much later, like 8 years later than Green Lantern #1. So it's a little bit more of a modern book. It is a late Silver Age book. It's a 12 center versus a 10 center. So, you can count all those things into play. I actually think both books are undervalued. This is one of those weird cases where I think with a lot of the Marvel books, I feel like, with the recent trends that we've seen where books have really skyrocketed, this is one of those books that didn't see that. It didn't really have that huge price jump that other Marvel books had. So it's still what I believe is an affordable book. And it is an iconic book. It is a great book to have, that first Iron Man series. I mean, it was a long running series, and there was multiple series of Iron Man. So definitely one that I think is underrated. But the question becomes, of the two, which is the better book? Well, based on the price, they would be equivalent. Both, this is $475, this is $800 in a grade, in a 3.0. But there's 2 times as many of these as these, So based on that, if you kind of do the math, it works out that they're almost the same price based on just the number, just on the supply, of the two. So, but I do believe that DC in some ways will win this battle, just because Green Lantern #1 is kind of that book that has more potential, because there is the Green Lantern series coming out. And it's the same as what I said in the previous video, that I just see that the character Green Lantern has a lot more potential because there is a TV series coming out, whereas Iron Man really doesn't have as much potential because he died in the last Infinity War or Endgame movie. So I do see that this book is underrated and undervalued. So I see potential in both. So I would actually, if I were like, well, I did, but I recommend picking up both. I think they're both great books. So definitely, I'd love to hear your feedback on it. Which do you think is the better book? Which do you think is the better spec? And which characters would you like to see me do future videos on? So this was round 2, and I gave both to DC, both rounds to DC. But I'd love to hear your feedback. Tell me if I was wrong. Like if I'm wrong on these things, just tell me. I'd love to hear it. And please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel, because you don't want to miss these videos. These are, I'm doing lots of cool videos. I'm doing lots of awesome unboxings, and you don't want to miss those. So thanks again for watching, and bye for now.